when the body is grounded, there is no charge, because when you're touching the earth, you have your bare feet on the earth, then electrically speaking, you are as big as the earth. You and the earth are one and the same. But when you put shoes on and you disconnect yourself from the earth or insulate yourself from the earth, then you lose Earth's negative charge, these free electrons. Think of negative as being no charge.
I'd like to welcome back to the show returning champion, Clint Ober. How you doing, Clint?
Good, Alex. Nice to be back.
Yeah, my friend. Thank you so much for coming back. Our first conversation has been it's been helping a lot of people around the world, and we've been able to really show them and explain to them what grounding does. So what I wanted to do is bring you back to really kind of go deeper than we did before in regards to what the deep science is behind it and what conditions it deals with and so on. But for people who've never heard of earthing or grounding, can you explain the basic concepts of what it is?
Okay. Well, the term earthing is commonly used. It's an electrical term, meaning that you connect something to the earth. And when you it's like every home has a ground rod that's driven into the earth, and then they have wires that are running throughout their electrical outlets and everything that are connected to that ground rod. And so, and it allows electrons to come up, to receive electrons from the earth, or to push electrons into the earth. And so it's but basically it's an electrical term until I came along about 25 years ago. And I spent 30 years in the communications industry, so where everything had to be grounded in order to maintain electrical stability and prevent ground loops, all kinds of things. But anyhow, it starts with the sun. I mean, the sun is spewing out photons and electrons, and anybody who saw the aurora borealis or any pictures of that, that was really beautiful this year. But anyhow, that's all electrons, coming in through the magnetic field in the North Pole. I don't know if they have them in the South Pole. I'm sure they do. But anyhow, but electrons come from the earth. Comes from the sun, and the earth is kind of like a capacitor, and a capacitor means it can hold a charge, like a little battery. Like your cell phone is a capacitor. It has a battery, which is the capacity to store charge. And then you can run your phone for a long time. And eventually it runs out and you have to plug it back in. With the sun, it's constant. So every 24 hours, we get exposed to sunlight. So the concept is, and to explain, let's see. So what happened is, first of all, you need to say that the earth maintains a natural charge and the excess of these electrons. It's an energy, and it's stored on the surface of the earth. And so anybody or anything that is connected to the earth will absorb those free electrons on the earth, and they will come up into the body and hold the body at earth potential, meaning the earth is about, let's say somewhere around 200 to 300 feet, 200 to 300 volts difference, and so when you put your feet on the earth, then your body will absorb enough electrons so that your body equalizes with the same amount of electrons that the earth itself has, pro rata, I guess, is a way to say that. And so what happened is throughout all time, from the beginning of time, all living creatures, all living plants, all living things, evolved on the surface of the earth. And during that time, they were always naturally grounded. You always had the earth's negative charge on your body. But as time went on and we got smarter, we started we started inventing all of these modern things that we have, all the modern appliances, devices, and communications, just everything. It's like 100 and some years ago, there was no such thing as, radio, television, or telephone, or anything. It's pretty bizarre how far we've come and how fast in the last 100 years or so. So, so anyhow, when you stand barefoot on the earth, then your body will just absorb these electrons. Your body is an electrical conductor. It will conduct electric current. It's not like a wire, but it will absorb. It's like static electricity. You can build static electricity all you have to do is raise, if you have a shirt on or whatever, just raise it up and you can actually measure the charge that's created on the body. Now, when the body is grounded, there is no charge, because when you're touching the earth, you have your bare feet on the earth, then electrically speaking, you are as big as the earth. You and the earth are one and the same. Mm-hmm. But when you put shoes on and you disconnect yourself from the earth or insulate yourself from the earth, then you lose Earth's negative charge, these free electrons. Think of negative as being no charge. Mm-hmm. And so throughout all time, we had no charge on the body. But when we put the shoes on, then we absorb, then we equalize with the voltage of the atmosphere, and it's going to be positive. Mm-hmm. And so what it's really all about is, and the conversation we'll have today is primarily about, is in 1960, or just a while before then, we invented synthetic materials, primarily the plastics, and the materials that we use on the bottom of our shoes are now insulated or insulative type plastics, where before they were leather. We were either barefoot. When I was a kid, we were always barefoot, or we would wear leather sole shoes, and the leather would be damp enough and your feet would perspire enough that they would be what you would call semi-conductive, so you were still always grounded. But in the late 1950s, we started, bringing these plastics into our environment. One of the first things we ever did was put them on the soles of our shoes. And at the same time, we invented those old shag carpets. They were green and orange and brown. Anyhow, so everybody started carpeting their homes with plastic, put shoes on their feet that were insulative. And so now we are no longer conducting, we are no longer naturally grounded. We are no longer naturally connected to the surface of the earth. And so now that created a significant change in our environment, in our biological environment. So now and nobody knew back then, and this is only 65 years ago, mm-hmm. But nobody knew that ground had any effect on the body. I think, some of the ancient indigenous cultures and so on, they did, because they would bury people that were sick in the earth. They would do all kinds of things, kind of a grounding type stuff, but they didn't really know what it was. They didn't know how it worked. But anyhow, so in 1960, one of the first things that began to rise was like diabetes, and then came along, autism, lupus, MS, and all of these, what we now call inflammation-related health disorders. They include everything from cancer to cardiovascular to, almost any common, the modern common health disorders that didn't exist or didn't manifest in very much of the population before the 1950s. So anyhow, so basically, I spent 30 years in the communications industry, like I mentioned earlier, and I learned about grounding, and grounding is just second nature to anybody in the communications industry. If there's any noise, if there's any interference, electromagnetic interference and so on, you have to ground it out. You have to shield it. You're shielding and grounding. And so anyhow, it's just second nature to me. But I retired from the cable industry and the communications in, gosh, I don't know. I was 54 and I'm now 79. So there's some math in there somewhere. I think 25 years ago, something like that. Anyhow, and one day I saw a tour bus pull up to a bus stop in a tourist town, and it was a Japanese tour group from Japan. And when they got off the bus and they were kind of walking in single file, and they all had big white Nike type tennis shoes on. And I didn't think too much about it, but it kind of stood out. And for some reason it was striking. And it looked like they just, the shoes were on sale somewhere and everybody bought a similar pair because they were all white. And anyhow, it just, prior to that, I had been working on something that had a little bit of an electrical problem. So I fixed that. But then when I went outdoors and sat on a bench and saw these people walk up, I just intuitively asked myself, I wonder if there's a consequence to humans no longer being naturally grounded. I did not have a clue, but I knew how to eliminate electrical problems with electronics. So, and the body is, it's 100% electrical. I mean, the body's electrical first, chemical second. Every cellular function in the body, every cell in the body functions electrically. And it's also a transceiver. It can send information and receive information. And they all work together, in the dance that make us up and as we live our lives. But so anyhow, I really didn't know. So I went home that night, and it was kind of late in the afternoon, but early in the evening. And I took out a voltmeter, and I thought, I'm just going to check this out. So I ran a ground rod into the earth and took a little wire, and I connected it to a voltmeter. And it was probably 100-foot wire. And then I took it indoors and started walking around the house, and I started measuring the static charges that were created on my body when I was walking, just lifting my shoe up and down on the floor. That's contact and separation or tribocharging. So every step you take in a modern home, you're creating static charges on your body. And your clothing is all synthetics and dissimilar materials. And so there's lots of static electricity there. And then I started measuring the AC, the alternating current, the EMF type charges. And when I would get close to a wall or an outlet, then I could see the voltage rise on my body. But it was only a couple of volts. Static electricity would go all the way up to 4,000 or 5,000 volts. In fact, if you can see a spark from your finger with static electricity on a doorknob, that has to be about 4,000 volts of charge. So it's huge. It's huge. It doesn't have a lot of amperage, so it can't really hurt other than a sting. But it's high voltage, very high voltage. And so I was playing with while I was playing with the meter, I thought, well, I will throw out a second ground rod out. And then I went back to the hardware store and I got a roll of metal duct tape, 3-inch wide metal duct tape that you wrap around furnaces and stuff, but it's conductive. And I taped it across in that night, I taped it across my bed, and I connected it to a wire, threw the wire out the window and connected it to another different ground rod. So I had the meter in one hand and the tape laying on the bed. So when I would lay down on the tape, then all the voltages, all the charges, whether it was static electricity or whether it was EMF or anything else in the environment, they would all disappear. They would go, because I was connected to the earth, and the Earth is infinitely large. I was infinitely small, so
Mm-hmm.
the Earth is going to influence the charge of my body by and then whenever I would disconnect the tape, then the voltage would all come back. And so I played with it a little bit, and then a little time went on. I was doing something and just looking at the meter, and the next thing I knew, it was morning, and I had fallen to sleep, and the meter was laying down by my side, and I woke up and I said, "Whoa, there's something going on here," because I normally don't. I have a real problem going to sleep, and I was 54 at the time, and I was I skied for 30 years. I raised on a ranch. I've done every dumb thing that any guy could ever do. But I had lots of aches and pains and chronic pain from old skiing injuries and tennis and so on. And so anyhow, I didn't think anything about that. I was just thinking, but I just fell asleep, and I thought, wow, there's something going on. So I played with it, went on the internet. The only thing you could do on the internet back then was AOL or something. This is back in the
90s,
late 90s. Yeah, and it was really hilarious. So anyhow, I ended up having to go on Nexus Lexis, which was a data retrieval where you can go and search databases and try to find information. And so I did a little bit of that. I couldn't find anything about grounding the body and sleeping better. And anyhow, a few days went by, and I was just really puzzled with it because, again, I slept better every night. And then I invited a couple of friends of mine who are in the neighborhood. I said, you guys got to try this because everybody's got sleep problems. I don't care who you are. Everybody's got sleep problems. And I said, you guys need to try this. And I went over and we put the tape on their beds. One of the wives got a little bit upset about putting duct tape on a sheet, but we were just playing. Anyway, so they tried it for a couple of days, and one of the guys came over a couple of days later, and he says, do you think, he says, this really does help with your sleep, but do you think it can have anything to do with my arthritis? I said, no, I don't think so. I just think it quiets the noise in the environment, and then you can sleep better. And then I recognized that my pain was significantly reduced. I mean, big time. And I thought, wow, there's something really going on. And then I got more intense on my research, trying to figure out, why does grounding make pain go away? Why does grounding make you sleep? And I could find nothing anywhere. I went to some of the medical libraries, went to one down at University of Arizona in Tucson, played around there a little bit, couldn't find anything. So then I said, well, I've got to go figure this out because it's too important. People need to know about this. So I went out to UCLA. I figured they know everything, they'll be able to help me out. And so I went out there, and I think I ended up with some people in the sleep lab, and I told them what I was doing and that we needed to do a study or something. And they looked at me and they said, you expect us to believe somebody's gonna drive a nail in the ground. That's the way they used it, nail in the ground, and tie a wire around it, and then tie a wire around their toe, and they're gonna sleep better. They said, get out of here, you're nuts. Go
Security.
away.
Security.
Anyhow, we joked around a little bit, and I learned that I knew nothing about biology, but I knew they knew nothing about electrical. And so we carried on a little bit, and they indicated that, well, to do a study may cost $5 million, may take 5 years, and there's no assurance it would be published. And I said, well, that's not a good idea. So I ended up finding a couple of the students that were there doing their dissertations or whatever. I got them involved and helped them, had them help me design a study. So I'd just go do it myself. And because they needed more information other than my anecdotal stuff. So we went out and we made up 60 ground planes, pads, 12 inches wide, 24 inches long, and they had a conductive material on the top. And then we, and in the study, 30 of them were grounded, actually working, 30 of them were placebo. So got a nurse involved and a couple other people, and so we went out and we ended up installing all of those pads. We've got 60 subjects to participate in the study, all that had pain and sleep problems and so on. So as an end result, all the people that were on the working grounding pads, they had reduced pain, significantly reduced pain, and significantly improved general well-being. I mean, they slept better, but their energy was better, their color was better, just a host of things. I could go on for hours on all of that stuff, but anyhow, so I got enough information that quantifiable information, even though it was still anecdotal, but it was organized and methodically pursued. So that we knew that grounding the body reduced pain and it improved sleep. We did not know the mechanism. I figured it was just common sense, cowboy logic. Well, you're getting rid of the charge. You're getting rid of the charge. You're getting rid of the static, and you sleep, because everybody sleeps on a foam bed that's a static generator, and then all of the covers are somewhat dissimilar. And so it's like maybe not, well, in the Midwest, you're in the Midwest. So if you sometimes in the summer you go up and pull the sheet up and you can see a lightning storm in between your sheets.
Sometimes there's no question. Well, Clint, let me ask you this. So that's a great primer for what we were talking about. And if you want to hear the rest of that story, you can go to the original conversation, which I'll put in the show notes. But so let's dive in deeper into the research and the health benefits. Is there any scientific research since those days that proves without a shadow of a doubt a lot of the health claims that you have put out there?
I think there's only one or two health claims that we I mean, there's I'll fill this all in as we go.
Please.
We have produced, if you go to the earthinginstitute.net and go to the research section, there's probably 100 papers there. And but 30 of those are peer-reviewed, published studies. The rest of them are various articles that were published, review articles and things like that. And but what we were trying to do when we started out is everybody wanted to know, well, we know it works, but why? What's the mechanism of action? So our mission was to understand why grounding reduced inflammation, why standing barefoot on the earth reduced inflammation. And so to answer your question, the studies was, one, figure out what the mechanism of action is. And then, we need to understand how the body worked in relation to, well, I kind of have to back up and tell a story a little differently. In the beginning, we didn't know anything. We just know the pain went away. And we could ground anybody and their pain would go away. Some of them would go away in 5 minutes. I mean, you could take arthritis in a hand and put an electrode patch on it and ground the person to the earth or to the electrical ground. And within 5 minutes, the hot burning pain would stop and go away. It's like pouring cold water on a fire. And so anyhow, all of our studies are what you call proof of concept studies. What we did is we grounded the body, and then we would measure, all of the biological rhythms, and respiration, by all the biofeedback,
heart, blood pressure, sure, all that stuff.
Yeah, and then we would measure, blood's viscosity and all of those things, and that's where we began to understand what we were doing. So, but along the way, I've been doing studies for 4 or 5 years, and I think it was 2004, went to the newsstand, and here's a Time magazine article, and it showed a picture of the body on fire, and it had the word inflammation across it. Before then, hardly anybody had ever heard of the word inflammation. And this was a group back at Boston, Mass, and they had been working on this for a few years, about the same amount of time I'd been working on grounding, because I started in the late 90s. And so anyhow, across the bottom, they said that you don't have all these modern health disorders, that all of these named health disorders. They said, you don't have cancer, you don't have this, you don't have that. It said, what you have is chronic inflammation. And the damage it does, it manifests differently in different people based on their lifestyle and their living environment. It's like some people will smoke or whatever, and they'll develop heart disease. Other people will develop cancer, other people, but they're really all the same disease. Mm. There's only, I mean, they say there's only, and that was what prompted us to get real focused, was because, but we knew, and they were talking about pain and, how pain manifests and all these things. And you can't have pain unless you have inflammation first. So this word inflammation became the key, understanding what was the cause of inflammation. And you could have read every book on the planet and you would not have been able to find the answer back in 2004 or in that time frame. It was called oxidative stress prior to that. But again, they didn't really understand it. So anyhow, one day I was reading a few papers on the immune system. And I came across a study where they were talking about the neutrophil. How the neutrophil, like if you have a pathogen in your body or a damaged cell that needs to be removed or some die-off or whatever, then you have these little white blood cells. They're called neutrophils. And for some reason, I mean, we kind of know how they do it, but anyhow, they know when there's an invader or an intruder, or they know when something needs to be removed. So they swim over, they're kind of like a jelly cell, and they wrap themselves around the pathogen, mm-hmm. and then they release reactive oxygen species. Mm. As soon as I heard the word reactive, then I knew it was electrical, because that's an electrical term. And so then it all started to unfold a little bit after that. And then, so what would cause inflammation? How does the reactive oxygen species, because in the normal processes, the immune system does this every day, all day long, in every living planet, animal, on the planet. So this is a common everyday immune response thing. And it's not something that builds up in your body. This is something that the damage will build up. But this process of the immune system reducing radicals goes on 24/7. So anyhow, then I started doing a little bit more work on grounding, and instead of looking at it so much like I would electrically, in communications, I started thinking, so basically on the surface of the earth, we have an excess of electrons. It's like a reservoir of free electrons, like a reservoir of water. And those electrons they migrate to charge. If there's a charge anywhere in the environment, they're free electrons, so they can move rapidly and reduce charge. That's really the only thing they do. So then just thinking that if somebody has arthritis, I put a patch on their hand, electrode patch, connect it to the ground, then the inflammation is a charge. I mean, it's a positive charge. It's actually a fire. It's like it's on. I mean, that's where the term comes from. Inflammation. So anyhow, you have this charge, and so when you ground the body, then the body will absorb electrons from the earth to the degree that the body equalizes with the earth. And as we know in electronics, you can't have charge in a grounded object.
Right.
You can't. That's why you ground everything. So anyhow, that was the big aha. And then we did some studies to verify that. And those are published. Those are all on the Institute. And the most important study we did, there's a lot of them there. I mean, they all have tremendous effect on the body, but it's really about the immune system. And so, but the number one thing that we learned was as soon as you ground the body, then those electrons come into the body, and then the little red blood cells, you increase the negative surface charge on the little red blood cells, by about 300%, almost 300, just not quite, but almost 300%. So that means you have 3 times more electrons on your blood cells than you do when you're not grounded. Because you're breathing oxygen, you're depleting these electrons, you're using them up, you're creating ATP, you just run out of energy, you get tired. Okay, so, but you have to constantly renew that.
If you're enjoying this conversation, I invite you to go deeper down the rabbit hole with me on Next Level Soul TV. It's packed with exclusive content like live special guest Q&As, daily podcasts, commercial-free access to the entire Next Level Soul catalog, early access to episodes before they air, and special meditations you won't find anywhere else. We will be adding new exclusive content every month, plus you can connect with me during my monthly live streams. Just go to nextlevelsoul.com/subscribe and join our soulful community today. I'll see you on the inside.
So anyhow, I don't want to get lost here. I get excited and get lost.
Real quick, let me ask you a real quick question, because as we're talking, is that one of the reasons why surfers can continue to surf to your age and older? I mean, I've seen these old. I don't ever hear of a surfer going, the arthritis. It's just not something you hear. I've never heard a surfer in a movie or documentary or in sports or anything hear these kind of things. And it's because when you're at the ocean, there's so much electrons and the sand and all that. Is that what it is?
Well, I'm sure that's part of it, because, in nature, I mean, who we are, where we came from, we're a part of the earth. We come from the earth. We breathe the earth, live the earth. I mean, all of our food, everything. So we're totally a piece and a part of the earth, up walking around. But but we were always connected to the earth prior to modern times, electrically and nutritionally. Everything was, our oxygen, everything was, it's all a system. We're part of a system. And in 1960, we cut the cord, we disconnected, we put shoes on that insulate us from the earth. Then our body lost its ground. So now these neutrophils, when they release these reactive oxygen species, if there's any left over after the oxidative burst, after they've wiped out the pathogen, if there's any remaining radicals, if you're grounded to the earth, never a problem, because they're instantly reduced and protects the rest of the body from oxidation. But if you are electron deficient, don't have enough electrons, and then a pathogen goes and oxidizes the neutrophil oxidizes.
Sure.
I'm getting tongue-tied there. But anyhow, so if there's any remaining radicals, they're going to reduce themselves in probably 3 or 4 nanoseconds. So they're going to steal an electron from whatever's in the immediate vicinity, which would be another live cell. And so they damage that cell. Another signal goes out to the immune system. Another neutrophil comes. And so you're setting up a chain reaction, a chronic, it's a fire. It's like burning a log. It's oxidation. And so when we patch, how we figured it out is how we patch somebody, then what we're doing is we're pouring electrons into the body, and they're reducing those excess radicals, reducing them and preventing them from doing damage. To give you an example, when I first started doing this over 20 years ago, the only people I could get from docs that had chronic issues were people who had MS. They said, "Here, you take them. We can't do anything for them." So I would take somebody who has MS, and I would put an electrode patch on their hand, generally where the bigger trouble was, and I would just have them sit there, and then over a period of about 15 to 30 minutes, their color would change. Their color would come up. They would look more rosy. The demeanor would change because they were in terrible stress, terrible pain. And so that would start calming down. And they were their O2 saturation came up, all these changes. And but most of all, the pain stopped. The oxidative pain, because it's neutrophils oxidizing the myelin sheath and exposing the nerve. That's what MS is. And so as soon as you put an electrode patch on somebody, the electrons from the earth are being absorbed into the body, and they stop the inflammatory process by reducing the remaining radicals. The immune system goes back to normal, and everything stops. So I got to the point, and I've been doing this for 25 years now, is I can honestly tell them that, as long as you're grounded, you no longer have MS. All you have is damage from MS, but the progression has stopped. And so anyhow, but and that's verification, and there's studies that touch on all this stuff on the Institute, but that's verification that it's just black and white. If you ground somebody, the fire goes out, the inflammation stops. To give you an idea, another reference, in the animal world, cancer rarely, if ever, exists in nature. The animals who live in nature, they don't develop cancer. We may go screw up their environment and create changes, and it will manifest. But I think the Wildlife Center, I think in Madison, Wisconsin, they put out a paper a few years back where they had examined over 100,000 animals through that facility, and I think they only had like 13 cases of cancer. So, but that supports the concept. Inflammation. I mean, cancer does not manifest in the natural world. Now, cancer is an inflammation-related health disorder. You have to have a pocket of inflammation for an extended period of time. It can be up to 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, but you have a pocket of inflammation somewhere. And inside that pocket of inflammation, you have a bunch of cells that de-differentiate, and then they start manifesting their own they become like a parasite, and they develop their own bloodstream, and they feed off of you. So, but anyhow, but on the other hand, animals who live indoors with their owners, 50% of them die from cancer, just like their owners.
Interesting. So cats, dogs, so on.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that's cowboy logic. You don't need to do all these 25 years of studies and all this craziness, but in the world we live in today, you have to have studies. They told me, they said, you're going to have to do a dozen studies before anybody would believe this. I says, fine. Then we ended up now with probably 35, 40 or more. And it's still going on. There are many other people now beginning to do studies.
How is this being received in the scientific community, which is well known for being open-minded and to new ideas? There's Jim Oshman told me one time when I first met him, he worked with us for many years and still does, in helping with studies and so on. But he told me, he says, science advances one death at a time. Meaning, makes sense. Yeah. As old scientists die off.
Yeah, because new science is not going to come on board, on stream, until these old guys get out of the way, because it's their reputation, its egos, and all those kind of things, and it's power and control. And I'm not saying any of it's bad. I don't even know. It's just, but anyhow, that's the concept. So, and then you take the youngest, and we work with all kinds of people all over. But in the medical world, it's like the young people who just graduate. They say, well, they never taught us anything like this in school. So, we don't know what it is. We don't understand it. And so the challenge is you have to somehow educate. It's about education. It's sure. Everything I do is about education. I don't, and that's all I do all day long, every day, is talk and try to get people to take their shoes off, put their feet on the ground, and get well. And then I have a little story that, and again, I'm not picking on docs at all, because if it weren't for docs, I wouldn't even be here. But I had a group of down in Southern California cardiologists, and they started buying some of our products very early on. This is back in around 2000, turn of the century. And one day they ordered some more, and especially this recovery bag like we were using in the Tour de France. So it was a conductive bag, sleeping bag kind of thing. So anyhow, they would buy those things a dozen or more at a time. And so I was headed down to San Diego anyway, and they had ordered some, and I said, well, let me stop by. I'll just drop them off. and I just really wanted to meet the guy. And so I went in there and gave them to him and whatever. And I just asked him, I said, well, what do you guys do with these things? And he said, oh, we use them, to keep the staff off their hypertension meds. And I said, well, what about your patients? And he said, oh, no, we could never do that. But there's a reason. I mean, one is it has to be approved by AMA before any doctor can do anything.
Sure.
But more so, it was like the conversation went kind of like, he said, look around here. There's half a dozen staff and 3 or 4 doctors. We have this big building. We're all married to women who have doctors as husbands, so we have to live the lifestyle, all this kind of stuff. But not only that, we went to school for 12, 14 years, whatever, and said we have protocol, we have to follow, we have to do what we do. But they said the main thing is, we can't tell people to go home, take their shoes off, and get well for free. We have to pay we have to pay the overhead. It's not bad for business. It's the type of business we have created. It's the culture we have created. It's like when back in the 70s when I was a kid, they said, don't worry about when you're old. We'll have a pill for every ill. They have a pill for every ill today. but we don't have
pills. A lot of those pills actually get you ill.
Yeah, but we don't have health. That's the main problem.
Yeah.
And so anyhow, this has been, fun for me to play with all these people and whatever. But it really comes down to, I could talk until I was blue in the face, but nobody's going to believe this until they actually experience it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why.
And it's pretty cheap to try to do it. Go outside, stand on the ground. I mean, you don't need products. I mean, you don't need products to get it done, but obviously there are some products and things you could do inside. We'll talk about that later, but just go outside and put your feet on the ground for 30 minutes. It changes your life.
Yeah, just stay there until your skin turns pink, your color turns pink, your O2 set, you actually breathe a little less because you're breathing a little deeper. Your energy comes up, the demeanor changes.
Well, I mean, if you just go back to when you were a kid, or even anytime you go to the beach, and I'll go back to the beach because the beach is grounding at its ultimate, because it's the sand and you're there. And then you also have the energy of the ocean and the electrons coming in off the ocean. There is a different feeling there than you have at a pool. Like you have an energetically different feeling. And I even remember that when I was a kid, it was almost euphoric in many ways when you're at the beach for a long period of time.
Yep.
It is a beautiful thing. Now I want to ask you a few questions in regards to specific ailments to see what it does and how grounding helps it. Based on our conversation, understand that inflammation is the cause of every major illness. Right. But just curious, what does it do to your blood? Does it thin your blood? How does it help with blood?
Okay, most everybody has thick. If you're wearing shoes, living indoors, most everybody has what they call thick and sticky blood. Or if you look at it under a microscope, you'd see how it's all stacked up in kind of a rouleau formation. And so the number one thing and the number one benefit of earthing is when you touch the earth, then you absorb these electrons, and then they are added. Every red blood cell, you increase the electron charge by, it's actually 2.7, it's about 270%. And so what happens is when the blood becomes more negative by adding these Earth's electrons to it, then they kind of act like little negatively charged magnets. You push them together and they push each other apart. So as soon as you ground the body for maybe 5-10 minutes, then all of your blood thins and normalizes like it would be in nature, because if you were standing barefoot on the earth, and the animals all have nice thin blood. People have, today most people have to take blood thinners and all of these challenges and problems. But anyhow, so it normalizes, I'd like to say it normalizes blood, but today we don't know what normal is. But anyhow, the first thing that happens is, and there's a study on the Earthing Institute, the blood viscosity study, and there's a little movie that actually shows the blood before and after being grounded, and it's dramatic. And so it just returns the blood to normal. It returns the blood to what it would be like if you were living outdoors barefoot on the earth. I mean, it restores the normal state of blood, the normal electrical state of blood. Blood is electrical.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're
everything in our body.
Yes, yes.
Well, let me ask you this: what does it do for viruses or common colds and things like that?
Okay. The problem that everybody has, and there's a handful of studies also mentioning COVID, some of them not done by us on the Earthing Institute site, but what happens when you ground people with COVID. COVID is like a cytokine storm in the lungs. That's what causes the problems. Mm-hmm. Like similar with asthma, similar with COPD, similar with all of these respiratory illnesses. So what happens when you ground the body? The first thing that happens is you reduce inflammation in the body. So while your body's inflamed, what's happening is you have a fire in your body, a slow burning fire. And so the immune system spends all of its energy, all of its effort trying to put out the fire that it itself is creating because it's no longer grounded. But the immune system doesn't know it's no longer grounded, doesn't know that it's creating the fire. So as soon as you get grounded, the number one thing that happens is it puts the fire out, reduces the inflammation. That's the hot burning pain, the Vicodin pain, all that kind of stuff, the anxiety, irritability, all of those chronic things. So those all reduce quite rapidly. Then the immune system can quite quickly, in a few days, clean up a lot of the damage that it was creating. Then fully restored, it can go back to work. Now it can take on viruses, it can take on anything and keep you healthy. Mm-hmm. Your immune system is compromised. That's why you get colds. That's why you get all of these. You don't recover from them. Let's say you're going to get colds no matter what. You're going to get exposed to these things no matter what. But it's the ability of your immune system to respond and handle them. That's the question here. So grounding reduces, it takes the stress off the immune system. It can go back and do what it's supposed to do.
How about muscles? How about muscle soreness?
Muscle soreness. We did a couple of studies up at the University of Oregon with Dick Brown. He trained Olympian runners, and that's where we actually did our first study with Nike. But anyhow, that's a different story. But anyhow, so what happens with delayed onset muscle soreness or muscles? Let's say you go out and you work out, you play tennis, or you go do yoga. You're doing stretching, you're doing whatever, or weightlifting, or no matter what it is, you're exercising. So as you're exercising, you're creating a lot of inflammation in the body, a lot of damage. Now, if you're grounded, and that was what we took a group of 20-year-old healthy male students at the University of Oregon. And half of them we grounded, the other half we did not ground. And then they were kept in a hotel room, except for going to class and going to lunch and whatever. But they stayed in a hotel room for 7 days, every one of them individually. We only did them, I think, 1 or 2 at a time. And so this environment was identical. The food that they ate was identical. Everything was identical amongst these subjects. And the subjects so then in order to induce inflammation into their bodies, I think they had them do, I don't remember, 3 or 4 sets of crunches, or, lifting a third of their weight on their shoulder, and, 20 times, 2 or 3 different sets, 20 times each. So technically they shouldn't have been able to walk in 3 days. And they barely could walk after 3 days. But anyhow, so the grounded subjects versus the ungrounded. The ungrounded had a lot of pain, a lot of soreness, And we did MRIs daily. We did blood draws, did everything. We measured everything you could measure on these kids. That study is at the Earthing Institute also. And so anyhow, the main thing is we had a significantly reduced delayed onset muscle soreness in the people and the kids who were grounded. For instance, bilirubin is one of your major antioxidant stores. And in the grounded subjects, it maintained pretty much normal. The ungrounded subjects, it just fell through the floor. The white blood cell counts changed and so on. But anyhow, so the grounded students had significantly less inflammation, less pain. They could move, they could work. But the ones who were had the normal ungrounded delayed onset, they could barely move in 3 days. And the blood markers and all the charts and everything for that whole study are on the earthinginstitute.net. So the main thing is, it's like the Tarahumara Indians and some of these barefoot runners around the world. Right. They can run 40, 50 miles, not even stop. And they don't have the inflammation or anything because they're constantly grounded, and the body's like a fuel cell, and sunlight and
And is that, I think you mentioned earlier that the Tour de France had their athletes would ground themselves while they sleep at night to help with with everything we just talked about.
Yes, yeah, that was the whole reason for it. That was one of the first things we ever did. We grounded them for like 7 or 8 years in a row. Team Discovery and U.S. Postal Team, and the number one thing that they all and again, there's videos on the Earthing Institute, all that stuff. But the number one thing that the coaches and everybody found remarkable, but was one that everybody finished the race. Every rider on the team finished the race every year that they were grounded.
Interesting.
And that's almost. But anyhow, they had lots of injuries. They would have crashes and then have I forget what they call them, skid marks, but just rip skin off and all kinds of things. But they take the electrode patches and put them around wherever they had injuries. And one of them had a bicycle where you could see where the sprocket actually cut into the leg and everything, and just a horrible looking. But anyhow, they patched them up, put patches around, grounded them and they slept grounded also in those recovery bags. And then the next day they got up and they stayed in the race, because you can't take a day off,
Sure.
But they all survived. But anyhow, so what we found there was the healing time was reduced by about 70%. I mean,
that's
you had significant, because again, it's about inflammation, because when you're not grounded, then the body's going to be trying to reduce those damaged tissues and everything, and then it's creating that hot burning pain that you feel sometimes. Well, that doesn't occur when you're grounded, because your body's flooded with free electrons. You're going to have pain, but it's more of a pain, that soft pain, like leave me alone, let me heal. But that hot burning pain that you have to take the heavy Vicodins and those kind of things for, that does not exist when a grounded person.
Now, is there any side effects to grounding, earthing?
The number one side effect of of grounding is there are no side effects, because basically, it's like in the animal world. Cancer doesn't exist you can't have cancer if you're grounded. I mean, you can't have these things if you live a grounded lifestyle. Now, if you're going to ground for an hour a day or 8 hours a day, now I'm not going to say that's going to prevent some of this stuff. But if you were, it's like, I know there's something I saw there a while back. There's, a mole, what they call a hairless mole, little. But they don't ever manifest any inflammation whatsoever. It's one of their one of the studies they were doing to research inflammation, but it doesn't manifest. But
it lives in the
they're looking for molecules and whatever inside the body, and it's really not that at all. It's really the free electrons of the earth preventing charge, because they're in the ground. You can't. So it's all kind of obvious. It's all kind of cowboy logic, subtraction and
sure.
And,
let me ask you this, Clint. This all sounds great. We all obviously can't live outside. We can't sleep in our backyards. We have homes. We have lives. what can we do with either products or something to help us ground into indoors?
Okay. Well, the first thing that I try to tell everybody, any amount of grounding is good. More grounding is better. So always do whatever you can because you're going to get benefit. Because if you can just shut the fire down for even a half hour, that's good. And I tell, I could go on and on, but it's like the women, and the women have twice as many pain receptors as men do, so they're more sensitive. And we all know that. We just didn't know why.
I live with women, sir. I know, sir.
So first of all, I have to say one thing about this. I never got in this business because I ever wanted to sell a product. I was retired. I didn't need the money. I didn't need anything. I was just interested, and this was overwhelmingly interesting. And but along the way, when we were doing our studies, we had to make ground planes, ways to ground people, so that we could do our research. And the first thing we used was an electrode patch, just an EKG patch, and a 20-foot coil cord, and stick it to a ground rod or stick it in the electrical ground of the earth, the electrical ground. And so that was number one. And it is still the most effective product we have for acute localized trauma. And but beyond that, we knew that it's hard to ground people because they all move around. So can't ground shoes because the office's floors aren't grounded and so on. So in our studies, we designed mats that people could lay on, put their feet on, sit on, or sleep on. And then we made bigger versions of those mats. So it's really the mats, and we made dozens of different kinds of them. We started out with carbon and polyester. Then we went to cotton and silver and many, many different gyrations. And today, the primary product that we sell is a black carbon mat. But anyhow, so we had to develop these ground planes or mechanisms to ground people. So we asked ourselves one day, what's the number one thing we can give these people? Because everybody who participated in the studies wanted them for themselves. Then they came back and wanted them for their parents, especially their moms. And so we ended up kind of, as an accidental business that evolved. It got bigger and bigger and bigger. And so, but these products were, we decided to do the bed sheet primarily because people don't comply with treatment protocols. So we figured, well, all we have to do here is just put it on the bed, and all they have to do is come home, lay down, go to sleep like they normally do. They don't have to do anything, and let Mother Nature do the work during sleep, because during sleep is when primary time, the body heals and restores itself. So we ended up making those products, but we had to abandon a lot of them. A lot of the old ones that we abandoned, they're still for sale. Amazon sells a hell of them with the China distributors and so on, but they don't last very long. So what we decided, we had to have a product that was bulletproof in the sense that if somebody buys it, there's a reason they're buying it. They want to get well. So we need to make sure that it does what we produced in our studies. And the only way we could do that after 20 years was with carbon. And so that's the only product we sell. We mass produce them. We sell them around the world now. And we keep the cost as low as we possibly can. And because this is more of a humanitarian effort than it is to go and get rich. And it's not something that you can market like you would a normal product. It has to be experienced by and large before anybody will believe it. Then once they believe it, usually a 35 to 55-year-old mom, she buys it for some reason, and she uses it for 2 or 3 days. The first thing she does, gives it to her mom, gets another one for herself. And then as she has disposable income, she keeps doing that until she's grounded almost everybody in the family. Right. And so that's how the business has grown. And it's really and the moms like it because they don't need to know all the science. They just need to know it works.
Well, Clint, I'll tell you what, I've been using them now for years. Before we met, I was using the older products. And then after we did our first conversation, I was able to get a hold of the mats, and I've been sleeping on them. I have them on my all day. My feet are grounded underneath my desk. and I have a pillowcase. I have all that. They work wonderfully. And it's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you back, because I wanted to share this information again, because there is so many people in pain with inflammation and things like that. So I will definitely put a link in the show notes, in the description of the video, for these amazing products as well. But again, go outside. It's free. You know, lie down on the weekend in a park, and and just feel how you're going to feel differently.
Stay there until the pain stops.
There it is. Clint, I want to thank you, my friend, so much for coming back on the show, and for all the tireless work you've done over the years, my friend. You are doing God's work, as they say, sir. You are a warrior. You are a warrior, my friend. So I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Yep, I'm just trying to help out. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Click on one of the videos below to continue your journey, and don't forget to subscribe.